So I haven't done a video in a while, and there's not a lot of reason for that. But I've kind of experienced something with my group that I want to talk about, and I'm going to do a few videos over this. My group has been playing the same adventure for about 2.5 years now, and we just finished, which is a pretty big deal. We actually completed a 1 to 20 adventure. But at the end of it, we had a discussion, and we're trying to figure out what are we going to play next. And it was pretty unanimous around the table that we wanted to try something different. After playing the same game for so long, even though there are plenty of options we haven't explored yet, we still want to try something different. And I imagine there's a lot of other players that feel this way. So I'm going to start a series about tabletops that aren't Dungeons and Dragons. Not that there's any problem with Dungeons and Dragons, play whatever it is your group enjoys playing. But if you want to try something a little bit different, hopefully one of the games in this series will kind of stick out to you. But for the very first one, I'm going to talk about Pathfinder, which is probably the most popular alternative I'm going to talk about. It's also the most similar to Dungeons and Dragons. So if you can understand the rules to Dungeons & Dragons, you already have a good idea of what the classes are like, you understand the different races, which they're called ancestries in Pathfinder, and you could probably pick it up relatively easily. But a few things that are really in common, or reasons I would play Pathfinder over Dungeons & Dragons. The math, I think, is actually pretty simple, and because the math is very streamlined, it actually makes everything relatively balanced. It's hard to have a character that is absolutely busted when everything is mathematically organized, and I really like that for the system. Similarly, it has all the classes, with an asterisk, that Dungeons & Dragons has, and a lot more, and I think the newer classes actually are very distinct. Now, the asterisks to talk about, the only class I think that doesn't translate well from Dungeons & Dragons to Pathfinder is Warlock. But if you do want to translate your Warlock to Pathfinder, I would suggest Witch. Witch is pretty much you have a patron that you serve. And yeah, that kind of has the same feeling as the Warlock. The big difference is there isn't an Eldritch Blast mechanic in Witch. You do get limited spell casting, sort of, but that's a little more like an Oracle, which is the other one I'd suggest you look at. Oracles are cool because they're kind of like spellcasters, but they're cursed. So they get really powerful spells, even though they don't get very many of them, but the spells curse them and actually give them negative effects. So you have to balance that system out. I think it's really cool, but everything else, if you play a fighter in Dungeons & Dragons, play a fighter in Pathfinder. You pretty much already know everything. You just have to understand some of the different terms. One other thing that Pathfinder has gotten a lot of praise for is that it has a very diverse set of characters in its storylines, which I do recommend the pre-built adventures, because the one we just finished, which was Strength Thousands, was really good. But yeah, if you want a story that has a lot of diversity in its characters and its story, especially with LGBT characters, Pathfinder's been pretty celebrated for that. So that's something to look at. Now also a few misconceptions about Pathfinder. I've heard people say that Pathfinder just copied Dungeons & Dragons. So pretty much what happened is that Pathfinder 1st edition, the rights were bought for Dungeons & Dragons 3.5. So there's obviously going to be similarities because Pathfinder 1 comes from Dungeons & Dragons 3.5. And even though the rule set from 3.5 to 5th edition have changed, some things are just going to still be similar, right? And that's not necessarily a bad thing. If you want to play a paladin in one game, there's paladins in other games. And in Pathfinder, there's different types of paladins. It doesn't even, Pathfinder doesn't even use the alignment system. They got rid of that with their kind of rebuild. Trying to differentiate from 3.5 a bit. But another thing I've heard of is that Pathfinder 1 is very mathy compared to Dungeons & Dragons. Pathfinder 1, I absolutely agree with being very mathy. Because Pathfinder 1, the way you busted characters is pretty much by getting as many +1 or +2 bonuses as possible. And it's possible even at level 1 for you to have crazy stat gains because of the way you've like optimized your characters. Like I mentioned earlier, for Pathfinder 2, they really did away with that system. There are still ways to get very small bonuses, but there's not as many and they're a little more restricted. That does mean certain things like intimidating your opponents into giving the frightened condition or flanking with your allies is massive because of the very few ways to get +1s or +2s to add to your effects. Which to me means your strength comes more from your teamwork and organizing with the other players than how many +1s did you stack on your character sheet that you don't really play around. They're just there. But Pathfinder 2 is not very mathy. I would say the classes are relatively balanced. There's probably a few levels where I would say like, oh, well, martial characters are a little bit stronger than casters at this level or whatever, but that's gonna kind of just happen. So I think it's really good. And then one thing I think Pathfinder has going for it that's really important are its tools for learning about the game and character creation. Because Pathfinder actually has 2 really good free tools that every player should know about. So the very first one is the Archives of Nethys, which is pretty much like the Wikipedia for Pathfinder stuff. You can find everything on here. Like all the information on your classes, your spells, your ancestries, rules. It's all on here for free. Right, and this is supported by the devs, right? When a new book comes out, you typically will get information about it relatively quickly on Archives and Nethys. I just really like, it feels very refreshing compared to Dungeons & Dragons, where it feels like they try to like overly monetize things. Whereas Pathfinder is like, yeah, we'd like you to buy our books, but here's the classes that are in the new book if you want to like use those. Or they had like Howl of the Wind came out, which has like centaurs and minotaurs and a bunch of new ancestries to it. It's like, yeah, you could buy the book, or it's just available online for free. They don't like try to price get you on anything, which is super refreshing. And the other thing I would recommend is the Path Builder app. You can access this via your like an app, like a phone, or via a website. I use the phone just because I always have my phone on me. And that's just my character sheet. It organizes everything. It tells you, okay, you hit level 4. These are the new class features you just unlocked. You get to choose 2 new feats. These are the types of feats. And it really does help. Like one of the things I would say that might be negative to Pathfinder compared to Dungeons & Dragons is that Pathfinder has a lot more options going for it. So certain things like you don't just pick an ancestry, but you have ancestry feats that you're picking, I think, every 3 levels, or maybe 4. I don't know off the top of my head. But yeah, and that to me is like, you're not just a goblin, you are this type of goblin. Or, you know, this is like the culture you come from and you get cool things from it. And I like these choices. Pathfinder does a really good job of differentiating characters from each other. So like I played in like the Strength of Thousands we just finished, had 2 wizards in it. But both wizards felt very distinct because of their choices. They were different ancestries, they picked different archetypes, which are, we'll say like subclasses or prestige classes, if you're familiar with those terms. And it really just allowed them to stand out really well. So like you can have 2 characters in the party with the exact same class and they still feel very different because Pathfinder allows you so many choices to specialize. And that's just really cool. But yeah, the Path Builder app is really good. It's also free. You can pay $5, and I think the only thing the $5 unlocks is the Familiars tab. I think the entire app is free except for the like Animal Companion and Familiar. But if you're playing the game, like I gave it $5 and I'm happy with it. I have no regrets about it because I use it every single week when playing. It's my character sheet on my phone. It's super handy. It also has like built-in dice rollers and it'll do all the math and stuff for you. It's just simple. But yeah, that's about it. I think Pathfinder I like it better than Dungeons & Dragons 5e, although the most important thing is playing a game with your friends. Having a group of people that you like spending time with, getting together once a week, once every 2 weeks, whatever it is, and just having fun. right? I have my group of friends, we play different games. Sometimes we'll get together and we just go upstairs and watch YouTube together. For us, Pathfinder is, or for me at least, Pathfinder is kind of just an excuse for us to all get together and do stuff. Right, and that's why we can play like other systems. Like I'll do a video on like Amber Diceless, which we play once a month, and that's like an RPG from the 70s, so that'll be an interesting video to get down. But yeah, if you enjoyed this video, or you think I like left something out, put something in the comments. I'll be doing other videos based on other tabletops, kind of like this one. I'm not trying to go too in depth with things, but just kind of an introduction. Like if you're interested in playing this type of game, here's an alternative for you to try. So yeah, like the video and stuff if you do. I'll try to have another one out next weekend, or we'll see if I can be more consistent. But yeah, thanks. Bye.